So it says, and there was very little public concern in 1948 regarding the repeal of significant proportions of the Magna Carta in the Statute Law Revision Act 1948, because the repeals were regarded as a technical administrative clean-up of obsolete feudal laws rather than a substantive removal of rights. The 1948 Act was part of a long-term routine effort to modernise the statute book by removing legal deadwood, laws that were superseded by later legislation or of no longer practical utility. Well, I beg to differ, because, this is the thing, right? Chris Packham, for example, he's wanting to do a lot of rewilding in England, right? He's, keen on nature and wildlife, right? So, and protecting it, right? But also having it so people can go on there. But actually protecting the wildlife specifically, right? Now, this is the thing. If they say, the swans are the Queen's property on the royal forests and hunting grounds, people weren't allowed to, hunt animals on there, or even particular trespass, right? But let's say, King Charles now, right, supposedly is a environmentalist, and King Charles is meant to be pro-nature and wildlife and environment, is wanting to make money out of all these clean energy and wind farms, right, and or solar, or even other energy, from the moving oceans and water and other things, right? And he's supposedly, Sir David Attenborough wants to, protect wildlife and nature as well. If they still had the King's forests, and if people weren't allowed to kill the animals on there, and if they were preserved and protected, well, wouldn't that actually be pretty much exactly the same that Chris Packham wants to do, right? By having more wildlife and forests and nature and animals which are protected and not attacked. So if the king rewinded and went back in time and had all his lands and protected animals, which were the king's property, and people were allowed to kill and eat those animals, right? Isn't that exactly what Chris Packham wants, really? And therefore, if the king wasn't, serving him up for lunch, having, venison for his meals, if he'd become a vegetarian king and just chose not to kill the animals himself or hunt them, just went full on veggie, and had a mega veggie diet, right? Nuts and berries and seeds and, whatever, spinach soup or whatever he's having, right? And all the animals were just there to be alive and live. And they were going to protect the forests and actually have more of them and just call them royal forests, right? Not necessarily it could be the sovereign forests of the nation, the sovereign forests of the people, when you call them the King's Forest, right? Then isn't that perfect? Isn't that a perfect plan for not only David Attenborough but also Chris Packham? But people don't see it like that, and as long as if you could go walk on there, for walks in nature and stuff like that, right, not get done for trespassing, it seems like it would actually be a good idea. But apparently, we're modernising now and scrapping all this deadwood and old laws, but it doesn't seem that actually, we're in the year 2026 and Chris Packham's on television saying, no, this is the future, this is modernisation, we need more green areas and forests and nature and wildlife, right? Oh, that's a coincidence. No, then the king didn't have loads of wild forests and protected wildlife and nature in 1215, and now they want to scrap it because it's all deadwood, right? So I disagree with this repeal of Magna Carta and the Charter of the Forest. In fact, calling it a Charter of the Forests isn't that the ideal? Isn't it a coincidence, right? Roll a dice, pick a number, any number, pick a card, any card, right? It's like on 007 with Octopussy, isn't it? Pick a card, any card, right? Pick a card, create a new act of law, any act. Choose a name for any act, right? Oh, look, it's Chris Packham, famous TV presenter Chris Packham, interested in building wildlife. He's got a nature watch program, right? Pick a card, any card, right? Oh, come on, Chris, name an act. any act you want, right? You know, what you after? What are you after, Mr. Packham? What you after, sir? What you want, right? You know, what's he after, right? Oh, I'm just after protecting the forests and the wildlife and the trees. Oh, you'll be after a charter of the forests then, Mr. Packham, wouldn't you be? Wouldn't you be after a great charter of the forests? That's a cracking idea. I just happen to have such an act of law myself, which is there for protecting the king's animals. Now, if those animals that you were wanting to be protecting and those forests just happen to be the king's, and he wasn't going to serve him up for lunch because he's an environmentalist now and reformed, and he's a gun vegetarian, wouldn't that be the perfect solution to your fucking dilemma, Mr. Packham, right? Like a fucking enigma, you know, as long as you don't go, you know, as long as you're like, you know, calling strangers on the approach or whatever, you know, or it's an offence to, you know, be on people's land without making yourself announced or whatever, you know, like, there's no failure to announce when Chris Packham turns up, is there, you know? It's like roll out the fucking green carpet, you know, roll out the red carpet, you know, get the entourage, you know, with the filming crew and the, you know, microphone boom holder and the, you know, makeup artist and, like, you know, they got the dog handlers, you know, and then the whole environmentalist fucking protest team. You know, it's like an Extinction Rebellion march, isn't it, you know? Like, here comes the king marching through the forest, like, bang the drums, you know, or whatever. It's, you know, like, there's not allowed to come without announcing your presence, and, like, you know, you're not allowed to be in anyone's land without announcing your presence, you know? This is the thing. It makes me laugh what this government, you know, or, like, you know, are doing. Removing illegal deadwood. Laws that were spent superseded by later legislation or no longer of practical utility, unless your king has actually, you know, become a reformed environmentalist and vegetarian, and he likes the wildlife just, you know, for the value of, you know, life on planet Earth and the benefit of the environment, except for, you know, the methane gases, which Bill Gates is like annoyed with, releasing all these CO2 gases from all the farting deer and pigs or whatever that are running around. You know, this is it. It's quite amusing, really.